Today, trying to make sure the booth was all going, and, well, here we are. Ezra chapter 8. Ezra 8. All right, so just to remind us, this is about where we're at. Ezra is on his way down there to Jerusalem. Artaxerxes is king at this point in time. He's attempting to kind of recover from the travesties of Darius and Xerxes' reigns. Just to give you an idea of what's going on in the rest of the world, Egypt is in the process of revolting during this couple of year period, 458 time period. As you see, it takes them a few years before they finally are able to retake Egypt. So during that time, it's kind of interesting. Athens has come over, the great enemy of the Persians now, and the last time that Persia was spending a lot of time dealing with Egypt was during that 10-year period when the temple work was not being done. You guys remember that? When there are troops going back and forth through there, the enemies of the Jews have discouraged them. The Jews are focused primarily upon their own houses, their own families, and their own ability to consume food and have wealth and, survive, while most of it is being taken away from them and given to the Persians, as those soldiers are probably camping in their backyard. And as we know from history, when soldiers camp in your backyard, they eat your food and sleep in your bed. And just pretty well take whatever they feel like, and you just smile and hope that they leave without killing you. That's happening again when Ezra's coming. So Ezra's arriving in Jerusalem at the same time that Persia's going to have to devote troops down there to the Egyptian area. So we're going to see an increase during this time historically of those soldiers of Persia moving through Canaan region. And then we're going to notice that the Jews do not panic like they did last time. Their leadership holds them together, and in fact, they increase in righteousness during that time. Okay. Like I said, we're going to look at Malachi probably next time. We'll probably get a little bit into Joel next time. This is going to be a traveling lesson, but when we get to chapter 9 and we're really looking at the righteousness that Ezra is attempting to bring to the people, we'll start throwing some of those back in there. All right, Ezra 8. All right. In 458, this is what the world looks like according to the Persians. They are in control from India through Libya. They have, territory in northern Greece, Thrace region especially, Macedonian regions. They are all the way up there past the Caspian Sea, surrounding the southern side of the Black Sea. They own the world. Rome at this time is causing some problems on the western half of the Mediterranean, but not really any real issues for the Persians. They're going to have some wars coming up and scuffles with the Greeks, but nothing too badly at this point. So the powerhouses of the world are Persia, and ironically, that tiny little, jutting out over here of Greece, because in just a century or so, we're going to see the rise of the Macedonians, and then Alexander the Great is going to come onto the scene. So that's Persia right now. I put this map up because I want us to understand where they're coming from. So this is the world Artaxerxes rules over. His father and grandfather have dealt with most of this Turkey region all the way up into Greece. They pacified Egypt during their reigns. They really solidified over here, disastrously tried to go into India, disastrously tried to go up and fight the Scythians. Lots of disasters during the Xerxes and Darius's reign. But this section is strong, with the exception of Egypt, as we've talked about. So we've got Babylon right here in the middle. That little Judah that we've talked about is probably somewhere in that region, central Mesopotamia region. We're going to notice some of the cities of the Jews talked about again, in connection to the Euphrates especially. We'll be talking about that here in chapter 8 in just a moment. But that is smack dab in the middle of safe land. Like, there are no revolts anywhere around this. Smack dab in the middle. And so Ezra's primary concern is not enemy nations. His primary concern is bandits. We're going to see that here in just a second. All right. Any questions or comments before we start diving into chapter 8? Cool. So I'm a little scattered today, so there is no telling where this discussion is going to wind up. So just buckle up. Like, it's been a long week. Okay, Ezra chapter 8, 458 BC. The first 14 verses, I debated reading it or not. I'm probably going to wind up reading it anyways. But these are the genealogy of the people who come with Ezra. Notice some of the differences. In verse 1, these are the heads of their fathers' houses, and this is the genealogy of those who went up with me from Babylonia in the reign of Artaxerxes the king. Who is the me being discussed? Probably. I have no reason to doubt this. From this point forward, we're going to get a lot of I statements, me statements, because Ezra is actually giving his perspective. This could be his accounting of what he does. It could be journal writings. It could be him dictating and somebody's writing from his perspective. Who knows? But the previous parts, obviously, are compiled earlier because he wasn't born yet. And for some of it, his parents probably weren't born yet. So can't be alive for that. The list that we have from verse 2 down through verse 14 is incredibly similar to the same list in chapter 2. What that probably means is that only parts of the families came with Zerubbabel, and parts of the families remained in Mesopotamia. Some will try to say that this is attempting to combine all of it. So those who came with Ezra includes those who came with Zerubbabel. Jews don't really buy that, and I feel like they would know a little better than us because they started not buying that incredibly soon after the writing of the book of Ezra, so who am I to argue 2,200 years later? So these are the remaining people who stayed behind. Some of them, we can recognize their names. Sons of Phinehas, Gershom, sons of Ithamar, Daniel, sons of David, Hattush. So we're getting some names that we recognize. So by the fact that they're mentioning Phinehas and Ithamar and David, we're getting high priest level individuals. We're also getting royalty returning. Not many of them, though. We've got some names like Shechaniah. We've talked about him a little bit early in the book of Ezra. He's bringing individuals, about 150 of his family are coming with him. Sons of Pahath Moab, about 200 of them are coming. Sons of Zatu. We've got Shechaniah. His is a name that we see kind of frequently through Scripture. 300 and so forth and so on. You can see verse 6 has got 50. Verse 7's got 70. 8 has got 80. That's kind of weird how that just keeps increasing with its number. But anyways, verse 9's got 218, 160 in the next, 28 until we get down towards the end. It's about estimated about 8,000 individuals if you add in women and children relative numbers. Okay, any questions or comments on that? This is quite a large group coming compared to Zerubbabel's. Zerubbabel's being about half that size, probably at most. So they are coming to really establish themselves. But Ezra is setting a tone. We saw this in chapter 7. Why is Ezra coming to Jerusalem? What is his purpose? Yes. He is incredibly law-focused. Zerubbabel was concerned about, yes, building the temple, but also, living. So he has a lot to deal with making sure that they can actually be a viable people in the land. Jeshua, the high priest of that time, his primary concern was establishing the foundation, establishing the altar, but he can't really be high priest until the temple is built. We saw that in chapter 6. Ezra is now coming along. 150 years ago, Jews started being taken into Babylon. This is a long time. Some of these people were up to third, fourth, potentially fifth or sixth generations. They have never been to Jerusalem. Their parents have never been to Jerusalem. They don't know what it's like there. They're used to having to learn the Babylonian language or the Persian language. And then, also at home and at special occasions, they say some weird archaic language, and I don't really get it. That's Hebrew or Aramaic. Because they're not really Hebrews anymore. They're exiled Hebrews. And the exiled Hebrews are not great with the law. We've been seeing some of that with the development of the Mishnah during this time. Any questions on that, comments? Cool. So these individuals coming back with Ezra are going to be of an interesting caliber. They are high, prominent, wealthy individuals. We're going to see that when we look at the numbers over there from verse 24 to verse 30. We also have Artaxerxes adding in quite a bit of wealth, and that's going to be included in that section. But there's a huge issue Ezra has, and I think it's so fascinating because when you go back to chapter 7, and you read Ezra's genealogy. Verse 1, he is Ezra, the son of, go down that list until you get to the end of verse 5, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the chief priest. we would look at this and we would say he should be the high priest. Right? I mean, I made a big deal about that last week. Ezra does not make that. He does not make that argument. When we get to verse 15, he says, I gathered all the people there to the river that runs to Ahava, and there we camped for 3 days, and as I reviewed the people and the priests, I found none of the sons of Levi. Well, he's a son of Levi. Let's just talk about that for a moment. He does not include himself. Ezra is standing in the position of, I call them lawgivers. That's my term for it. I don't know if anybody else ever does. He's the Moses. He's Samuel. He's Elijah. He's Christ. He is somebody who is outside, cannot be plugged in easily into the typical hierarchy, but exists to return the people to hierarchy, to return them to their righteousness, and to return them to how they're supposed to be. So we look at chapter 7 and we say Ezra should be high priest. He's awesome. Like, his credentials are huge. He looks and he says, we need somebody who can function as a priest. And he does not include himself. Second point I want to make over verse 15. He says, I reviewed the people and the priests, and nobody is of the sons of Levi. Did you guys notice that? How can you have a priest who's not of the son of Levi? Anybody want to take a guess? You got to set up something. And they have historical precedent. Which nation, ruled by Jews, said anyone can be a priest? Israel. The northern nation of Israel. Remember, sin of Jeroboam. That was one of his core tenets. Now we've got Jews that have been exiled to Babylon. They're having a hard time proving lineage. We saw that with the returners under Zerubbabel. We're going to see that with some of the returners under Nehemiah as well, once we get into the next quarter. So they're having a difficult time proving lineage. He is wanting everything to be perfect. And he's got people who function as priests, and they're not even provable Levites. So what do? He sends out. And this is one of those things that scholars will argue about, and I don't agree with, but I'm going to tell you because if somebody comes up and tells you about it, I want you to at least say, Josh told me, and he said it was dumb, so don't listen to it. Okay. So in verse 16, he sends for Eleazar, Ariel, Shemaiah, Elnathan, Jerib, Elnathan again, normal Nathan, Zechariah, and Meshullam, leading men, and for Joiarib, and another Elnathan, who were men of insight. This is like trying to meet all the Jessicas. There's dozens of them, right? She's not even here for that. It was exciting. Sometimes names are really popular, and evidently Nathan and Elnathan were very popular during their birth years. So he sends for these guys who are with him and intending to come to Jerusalem. And he sends them to Iddo, the leading man at the place Casiphia, telling them what to say to Iddo and his brothers and to the temple servants at the place Casiphia, namely to send us ministers for the house of our God. Now, here is the discussion that scholars have based on this. We have no archaeological evidence of it. We have this. And they start to develop an argument. I'm going to tell you the argument, and then you guys are going to agree with me. It's just dumb. We're not going to go there. But the argument is the phrase used in Ezra 8, the place Casiphia, is the same way it speaks of the Temple Mount. In Deuteronomy 12, when you get to the place, it's the same phrase. When in 1 Kings 8 and 29, when God had shown them the place of the house of the Lord. And they argue that there's a chance that there was a functional temple at Casiphia. Now, we've already talked about the temple at Elephantine, right? You guys remember that down there in Egypt. lots and lots of evidence. We've dug it up. We can see how it was made. We've got letters. We know the names of the priests. We know how they functioned. We know what other gods they allowed to go into the temple. We know a massive amount of information about it. Temple in Cassiphia, we have zero information about it. So what that sounds like to me is that you got a bunch of scholars trying to cause problems, and that's dumb. You guys agree with me? I don't think there was a temple in Cassiphia. I think what we're seeing is a concerted effort to place in one single location a group of people to be educated to function at the temple. That's what I think we're seeing here. We might call it temple school. This is where you go when it is of your family and you are supposed to function at the temple. You go here and you learn how to do it. That is what I think Cassiphia is. I don't like the idea of a functional temple. I think it cheapens it, and I think it calls into question Ezra's character as well. For him to acknowledge a foreign temple other than the one in Jerusalem while attempting to bring them back to what only the law says makes him an idiot at best. And I don't like that. So I reject it. But in case somebody tells you that they had a temple out there in Babylonia, you know to say, Josh says it's dumb. Don't talk about it. Okay, any questions on that or comments or your thoughts on a temple of Cassiphia? Cool. I told you, I don't know where we're going today. We are going to talk about some stuff. All right. So he sends his individuals to Iddo. He is the leading man at Cassiphia. And when he gets there, in verse 18, it says, "And by the good hand of our God on us, they brought us a man of discretion of the sons of Mali, the son of Levi, son of Israel, namely Sherebiah, and his sons and his kinsmen." It lists down then the other individuals that are willing to come with: Hashabiah, Jeshiah, and his kinsmen, about 20, and 220 of the temple servants that David and his officials had set apart to attend to the Levites. These are mentioned by name. Not here, but they're mentioned by name somewhere. So they bring out a guy, Sherebiah, and his credential is, "I am of Levi." Not necessarily that he is of Aaron. Did you guys catch that? Instead, it's, "I am of the sons of Mali, the son of Levi, son of Israel." I tried to find scholars that are willing to talk about that, and that they won't talk about. Like, who's Mali? How does he fit into this? Is he a later dude? Is he an early dude? What lineage are we talking about here? Scholars won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, but talk about a temple in Cassiphia? Whew, they're going to write books on that. Frustrates me sometimes, you know? And anyways, they bring this guy out, Sherebiah. Sherebiah is an interesting guy. Jews write a lot about him because his name means it's really hot. And so they call him the flame of the exiles. He is the one that returns and stokes the fire. He is the one that returns and stokes the passions of the Jews. But his name literally means it's really hot. And I love that because that's such a mom thing to do to a kid. Oh, it's hot. Anyways. Any comments anybody has on 15 down through verse 20? Cool. So Ezra's got his people. Ezra's got his super Levites. Now, he's actually got to leave. Verse 21, "I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava, that we might humble ourselves before our God to seek from him a safe journey for ourselves, our children, and all of our goods. For I was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers and horsemen to protect us against the enemy on our way. Since we had told the king, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him. So we fasted and we implored our God for this, and he listened to our entreaty." So Ezra, I love this section because it really speaks to the character of Ezra the man. He says, I made a big deal that God is real and God does stuff. If you are doing good, he is with you. So I can't ask for soldiers. Like, it's such a good, logical connection. I just love it. And so he says, if my God is real, I have to act like it. We're going to fast, we're going to pray, we're going to humble ourselves, and then we're going to go out and we're going to believe that God has already made it safe. It's already done. Doesn't matter. It's going to be safe. Later on, it's going to talk about he protected them from the bandits. We're going to read that here in just a minute. But in verse 23, it simply says, he listened to our entreaty. Any questions or thoughts there? Clay? Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this is just a beautiful contrast. Based on what's written, here's a guy who says, I am going to go full board, all with the Lord. It's all in him and nothing. And then here's Nehemiah on the side that says, I can take a boat. He's having anybody's protection. And sometimes we put ourselves in a box. It's this way, and only do this all or nothing Ezra way. But Nehemiah is just as faithful by accepting the king's house.
Yeah.
And all that's recorded for us is a real short prayer. That's it.
Yep. Very true. Any other thoughts? Mm-hmm.
Just tacking on to what Clay was talking about, that's the thing, the scripture approves both, right? So it is that, how are you convicted?
Yeah.
This is a thing for you to decide. Can you ask for help or not? God doesn't say either was wrong.
I think Paul words it as whatever you do it by faith. You eat of the meat offered to idols, do it by faith and with thanksgiving. You don't, you do it by faith and with thanksgiving. They're both right. Do it without faith and thanksgiving, and it's wrong. Doesn't matter which one you picked. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah. 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 So we can make a connection here between how Daniel interacts with the kings he's under compared to the wise men. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar flat out says, I'm going to kill all the wise men after he talks to him for a few minutes. Daniel comes in and seems very weird. Ezra is in a similar position. We talked last week about how his title as scribe of the law of the God of heaven is the same title as other individuals in Persia, where they are the scribe of the law of this God. Perhaps Dagon, he's one that we know of. So if he's holding a religiously political office, and he is standing there advising Artaxerxes, how many times do you think he has said something similar to this? If you do good, the God of heaven is with you. How many times has he said that? To then turn around and say, we're doing good, and you finally agreed, and you wrote this awesome letter, and you're sending it with us, and you're giving all of this money and all of these animals, and you're telling everybody to stay out of the way, and everybody gets to help build the temple. Oh, God thinks it's bad, so we need some soldiers. Like, we just can't. Yeah. Okay. We got another problem coming up here in Ezra 8. We've had the problem of, hey, we got priests but no Levites. That's super weird. We've got the problem of, well, it's not really a safe road, but we've got to go anyways without any kind of protection. The other problem is we have a massive amount of money and we don't have any protection, and the people who are with us may or may not be up to snuff. That's the unspoken. We're going with some people, and some of them may be very tempted by the quantities we're talking about. So, verse 24. I set apart 12 of the leading priests, Sherebiah, of course, included, Hashabiah, and 10 of their kinsmen with them. I weighed out to them the silver and the gold and the vessels and the offering for the house of our God that the king and his counselors and his lords and all Israel there present had offered. So this is all of the stuff they've gotten. All of the Israelites still in Babylonia, all of the things that Artaxerxes is sending, all of the things his counselors and his lords have put into this in order to get the goodwill of the God of heaven. And he says, I weighed out into their hands 650 talents of silver, silver vessels worth 200 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold worth 1,000 derricks, and 2 vessels of fine bright bronze as precious as gold. We are talking about a massive amount. The silver alone is around 25 tons. And they've got 12 dudes that are supposed to be responsible for keeping it safe. It's going to take more than 12 just to move the 25 tons of silver. I think it's 4-ish tons of gold represented here. That is a massive amount of temptation. How many wagons do you think need to disappear for somebody to go from poverty to immense wealth of their own small kingdom? It's not very many wagons. Yeah, one would do it. Just one. And that's assuming they can get a ton on 25 on a wagon. That's still 25 wagons for a relatively small amount of people, most of which are not soldiers, probably all of which are not soldiers, and quite a bit of them are scholars. So high combat ability, probably not. So he weighs all of this out, and he says to them in verse 28, you are holy to the Lord, and the vessels are holy, and the silver and the gold are a freewill offering to the Lord, the God of your fathers. Guard them and keep them until you weigh them before the chief priests and the Levites and the heads of fathers' houses in Israel at Jerusalem within the chambers of the house of the Lord. So the priests and the Levites took over the weight of the silver and the gold and the vessels to bring them to Jerusalem, to the house of our God. So, he makes a lot of very powerful statements. You are holy. They're Levites, they're priests, they have been set apart for a special service. They are of a tribe that gains no land, just a handful of scattered cities, because their entire existence is supposed to be, you are here to make the people holy, whether they want to or not. That's their whole purpose. He had to go and get these people. Remember, verse 15 down through verse 20? All of the people with him are not holy. That's the distinction he's making. You are set apart. When the people of Israel turned to the golden calf at Sinai, Levi struck them down. This is that same people. He is setting them apart and making them really special. You are holy. The silver and the vessels are holy. The silver and the gold are a free will offering to the Lord. How much of a free will offering to the Lord are the priests allowed to keep? Nothing. That qualifies as under the burnt offerings idea. It qualifies as all of this is given to temple service and the functioning of the temple. No priestly tithe is taken from this. That's an important distinction, because whenever Israel tithes, they give their 10% to the temple. The priests take 10% for themselves, the priestly tithe. This is not included. So he continues. He says, you are to guard them, you are to keep them, and you are to weigh them before the people when we arrive. And we're going to check to see if these numbers are correct. Any comments before verse 31? Yeah.
What you're saying might help us understand something we're going to get to in Nehemiah. One of his last reforms is to try to have this guy named Tobiah out of the temple because he's got a warehouse set up inside the temple.
Yeah.
First, he's not a Levite, so he shouldn't be there. And then two, he's collecting parts of these offerings he isn't entitled to collect. And we kind of miss. Maybe a good way of thinking about it is think about the preachers on TV. They got their jets, they've got their cars, they've got their watches, they've got their expensive tennis shoes and expensive clothes, and they like to flaunt that. People are flocking to the priesthood because they want to get rich off of all these offerings that are being brought. And it would be such a temptation, as Dr. Michael said,
Yeah.
to take part of this offering and that's not yours, and then sell it out the back door in the fruit market.
Yeah. So true. Any other thoughts? Okay. Let's actually make them leave. Verse 31. Then we departed from the river Ahava on the 12th day of the first month to go to Jerusalem. Why do they wait till the 12th day of the first month? Yeah, there it is, Passover. You've got Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread, so that's 8 days. Probably then a couple of days to recover from all of this, get your stuff together, because you're not supposed to be doing that during Feast of Unleavened Bread. Then they get going. So yeah, 12th day. They go to Jerusalem. The hand of our God was on us. He delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from ambushes by the way. I want to know more. Sometimes the Bible says things, and then it just is like, move on. That's not really important. I would like to know what happened on the way. Did they just not see the ambushes? Did they get warnings? Did miracles occur? What occurred? Ezra says that's not really the point. Who cares? God took care of us. That's all that matters. Let's get to the important stuff, and that's intermarriage. Chapter 9, chapter 10. Purification. It says, I don't care how we got there. We got there, we're fine. We came to Jerusalem. We remained there for 3 days. On the fourth day, they go to the house of our God. The silver and the gold and the vessels are weighed into the hands of Meremoth the priest, son of Uriah. And with him was Eleazar, the son of Phinehas. And with him were the Levites, Jozabad, the son of Jeshua, and Noadiah, the son of Binnui. And the whole was counted and weighed, and the weight of everything was recorded. At that time, those who had come from captivity, the returned exiles, offered burnt offerings to the God of Israel, 12 bulls for all Israel, 96 rams, 77 lambs, and as a sin offering, 12 male goats. All this was a burnt offering to the Lord. They also delivered the king's commission to the king's satraps and to the governors in the province beyond the river, and they aided the people and the house of God. Okay, they arrive. They weighed out everything, they measured everything, they counted everything, and everything was good. So they rejoiced by offering burnt offerings. Any questions or thoughts anybody has? They did. That's true. Inspired by true events, and they didn't tell us what the events are, so we're going to be right. Yeah, very true. Okay. That's what we got for chapter 8. Next week on chapter 9 and then the week after with chapter 10, we're going to start delving into the big issue that Ezra attempts to deal with. He fails, but it's the one that he attempts to deal with. He does an immediate purge. Nehemiah has to come and do another purge because he doesn't quite get it done. Ezra comes across much more, I hesitate to say timid, but timid compared to Nehemiah, but that's like saying a mouse is small compared to an elephant, like they're not in the same category. But he doesn't come across nearly as powerful as Nehemiah is going to. He does quite a bit of self-destruction, tearing his own garment, pulling his own hair, sitting down, weeping. But Nehemiah is going to start pulling that out of other people's body. So, I mean, the comparison between the two guys that we're going to see here over the next 3 months. It's going to be fun. All right, any questions or comments on chapter 8 before I add in some extra stuff? Nope. Cool. Okay. Turn to Leviticus. I want to say 19. Let me see here. I'll find it in a minute. So we're going to start a discussion of one of the books called Yoma in the Talmud. So Talmud, Mishnah, Yoma. And it is about Yom Kippur. What feast is Yom Kippur? You guys remind me. I've got booths, I've heard Passover, I've heard what else? Day of Atonement. So it is the Day of Atonement. And they're going to start an argument that devolves into, why do we do this stuff with the red heifer? And I just love it because this is exactly what man is like. We're like, we're going to get together, we're going to have a serious conversation about the most important day of the Jewish calendar, and we're going to get stuck talking about this side thing over here for the next 3 to 20 chapters. Like, seriously. So, Yoma, 2nd chapter. 7 days prior to Yom Kippur, the sages would remove the high priest who performs the entire Yom Kippur service from his house to the chamber of Parhedron, a room in the temple designated specifically for the high priest during that period, and they would designate another priest in his stead to replace him, lest the disqualification due to impurity or another circumstance beyond his control prevent him from entering the temple on Yom Kippur. We're talking about the period after Ezra, but before 200 BC. So the next 200 years. Ezra's coming, we've got Jeremiah coming, the flame of the exiles, and they are zealous for the Lord. And the most important day, which is new for them because they got a temple again, they can do it, is the Day of Atonement. This is the day when their sins are removed. This is the day when they are pure in the eyes of God. But it requires a pure high priest. But humans are notorious for becoming impure. Look, let's just be honest, right? You can do it a lot of ways. So what they decided is we're going to build a little room in the northeast corner of the temple. And we're going to shove this poor man in there for 7 days and not let him touch anything and not let him do anything. We're going to make it out of materials that it's impossible to become ritually impure. So it's a stone room. And he's going to stay there to ensure he will be ready when the time comes. Now, adding to this, we're going to appoint a different high priest to do his work while he's stuck there for the 7 days. And if he dies for some reason while he's in there, we already got a high priest ready. So we can just substitute that right in. So that's the discussion going on here of talking about the sequestering of this man. Any questions on what I've described? Okay. Yes, it is exactly like designated survivor. So they're going to complicate it. Rabbi Yehuda, famous guy from 200 BC, the sages would even designate another wife for him, because if his wife dies, it says in the Torah, it will atone for him and for his house. But if his wife is dead, he doesn't have a house anymore, therefore he cannot get the atonement. Okay? You guys ever heard, I'm going to cause a lot of problems, but I'm going to say it anyways. Have you heard a man can no longer be an elder because his wife's dead? That's it right there. He can't be high priest and do Day of Atonement because he doesn't have a house anymore because his wife died before the Day of Atonement. Same argument. And we're about to look at this and say it's ridiculous. Okay, moving on. The priest must be married in order to fulfill the commandment. Due to the concern lest his wife die, another wife is designated to address that possibility. Maybe that would solve the problem with the elders. The rabbis said to Rabbi Yehuda, if so, that this is a concern, there's no end to the matter, as what if the designated replacement wife dies? The possibility need not be a source of concern. So sometime between Ezra and Rabbi Yehuda, the Jews decided we got to have some backups here to make sure we stay righteous. And Rabbi Yehuda comes on the scene, and he's like, yeah, this is what we need to do. And the other rabbis are like, dude, you're an idiot. Don't do this. Like, that's not helpful here. Where's the ending? Do you need stacking the wives, stacking the priests? Because what happens if a plague comes through on day 4 of isolating for them for the 7, and they're all dead? Dumb, right? But they go on. So, the halakha, the religious, spiritual commandment of God of sequestering the high priest prior to his performance of the temple service on Yom Kippur is comparable. Here's where they devolve into their discussion of to sequestering the priest designated to burn the red heifer. Okay, hold on a second. We're supposed to sequester the priest to burn the red heifer? The answer to that is no. That's not in Levi or Leviticus. That's what I was trying to find, and I don't remember. I can tell you later if you want to read through the chapter on the red heifer. It might be 29. I think it's a 9. There is no 29, so I don't know. I'll tell you later. So, the Gemara states that which we learned in the Mishnah there, in the tractate Para, so that's the early Mishnah stuff. 7 days prior to the burning of the red heifer, the sages would remove the priest who burns the red heifer from his house to the chamber that was before the Bira, at the northeast corner of the courtyard of the Temple Mount. That chamber is called the Chamber of the Stone House. The Gemara explains, and why was it called the Chamber of the Stone House? It's because all of the actions associated with the red heifer were performed in dung vessels, stone vessels, earth vessels, vessels that cannot become ritually impure. Okay. So we're going to sequester the high priest because we sequester the dude who does the red heifer sacrifice. But how do we know we're supposed to sequester the guy for the red heifer sacrifice? Why do we do that? That's what they ask. It's since a priest who immersed that day is fit for service and may perform the ritual of the heifer after immersion, even before sunset, as we learned in a Mishnah. They would intentionally render the priest who burns the heifer ritually impure so they can immerse him immediately to remove a misconception from the hearts of the Sadducees by means of a public display of disregard for their own ruling. For the Sadducees would say only by those for whom the sun set was the heifer ritual performed. Okay, you guys ready for this? So the argument stands as such. The reason we have to sequester the guy is so that he's not allowed to be ritually pure until sunset, because the red heifer is supposed to be killed at sunset, and it is only applicable to the people that were pure after sunset. So if we purify him before sunset, he's no longer qualified to offer the sacrifice because he's not included in those that the sacrifice can work for. Therefore, we have to sequester him. The Sadducees take it a step further and say not only does he have to be sequestered, he has to be impure, then ritually purified, through baptism, by the way, total immersion in the holy water, and then immediately do the red heifer sacrifice so that we don't have any chance of him being impure, therefore ruining it. Yeah. Yep. What was the purpose of the red heifer sacrifice? You guys remind me. It's purification. Makes one ritually pure. It is what happens if, for example, your father dies in his tent. Everything in there is impure that he's touched, so they bring in the water with the ashes of the red heifer with the hyssop leaves, and they splash it around, and it becomes pure again. Not sinless, pure. Two different concepts. Because now they're going to start asking, let's see, we talked about this one. This one's about the chamber. I don't want to talk about that. No, they go into something else here. I don't think I put it up here. Oh, here it is. So, the Gemara asks, granted that the entire verse is not established as referring exclusively to the red heifer because the words atone are written but the heifer's not capable of atonement, therefore it facilitates ritual purity, but Yom Kippur is about atonement. So why are we sequestering the guy when they're not about the same things? This is where the argument gets down to. We're sequestering a man for the Day of Atonement because we sequester a man for the red heifer because we think we need to. Because the Sadducees are causing a whole bunch of problems. That's why. Okay. So they use a verbal analogy. And this is where I want to leave us today because I think it's important for us to not fall into the same trap. It is stated, the Lord commanded to do. And it is stated, regarding the red heifer, this is the statute of the Torah that the Lord commanded. So we've got the Lord commanded to do, and we've got another commanded. Therefore, they are the same. Have you ever heard, myself included, a preacher say, this word was used over here and this word was used over here, so we're going to draw a connection between the two events? You've heard that, right? That's preaching 101. Look up the Greek word and talk about all the places it's there, right? That is exactly what they're doing. Why can I do this with the Day of Atonement? Because I'm doing it with the red heifer. It's because the phrase is the same. Okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at it that way. They go on from here, and I didn't put it all down because I'm like, they go on for chapters, trying to decide should we sequester the dude or not. And it boils down to exactly what Jesus talks about. He says that you will quibble over the most minute details until everyone is red in the face and wanting to destroy each other and miss the weightier parts of the law. Should we or should we not sequester this guy? That is a massive section on the section that is supposed to be devoted to how do we do the Day of Atonement correctly. And they spent about a quarter of it trying to decide should we sequester him because that's what we do for the other thing that we're not actually told to do. Sometimes we get fixated on certain things and we consider them to be very important. And I think it's important for us to remember that Jesus rebuked those kinds of people. Because when we get so minute, sometimes then we don't look at the rest of the stuff. And we think the most important thing for me to be putting down, for generations to learn how to do the Day of Atonement, is whether we should sequester a guy in a stone house that God didn't command, that we added to the temple grounds in a way that we made up. Thanks, y'all. You're dismissed.